Starting off this countdown at number 10, The Inconveniencing. This was Gravity Falls' first attempt to become menacing, and still be child-friendly towards its audience. For me, I actually really liked this episode. Dipper and Wendy established a bond, with Dipper creating a really nice character arc, all while him, Mabel, and Wendy's friends accidentally getting some ghosts angry by gate crashing out their convenience store. This leads to really amazing scenes with spooky images and music, stakes to the story, and a surprise twist laugh at the end. The whole build up to when the ghost finally appears is really creepy, but it picks up a lot when you see Mabel being lifted up in the air and her eyes glowing as she talks just like Kevin Michael Richardson. That's when everything got real. This is the first time we actually see anyone get possessed in the show ever. When watching that scene, it creeped me out, but it also really surprised me too, with where the show is going to go and all. Given that part where Mabel turns her head the other way, and much a parody to The Exorcist, it was really creepy yet really cool. Number 9, Northwest Mansion Mystery. Here, Dipper and the gang are invited to Northwest's party at their mansion, filled with a horrifying ghost seeking revenge, creepy wooden lifeless people, and terrifying sights of all kinds. This is a very dark Gravity Falls episode. While Mabel, Candy, and Grenda try to gain the attention of one boy, Dipper and Pacifica investigate the haunted tremors that rock the manor. In diving in, they discover a horrible secret that leads Pacifica to take a drastic turn. The twist here is incredibly profound and socially relevant, and surprisingly, Dipper and Pacifica's tandem pay off with romantic hints. And the best thing about this is it's not even focused on the main character. The real arc is with Pacifica, who turns from being one of the most annoying characters on the show to one of the best. Even with all its scary sights, it's still a really fun episode to watch. Number 8, Scarioki. Despite decking them out in Mystery Shack swag, the arrival of 2 government agents investigating the strange happenings in Gravity Falls does more to establish the season's arc than catalyze the episode's action. And the same can be said of Dipper's belief that, quote, there's something huge going on right under our noses. By the end of Scarioki though, it's an arguable point, because its second half set at the Mystery Shack's grand reopening party, organized by Mabel, is overstuffed with joys large and small. There's Wendy saying of a black light glowing on her teeth, it's like a crime scene in my mouth. There's a very stylish dressed Stan fighting off a zombie horde, yelling, the only wrinkly monster who harasses my family is me. And last but certainly not least, there's Mabel getting her reluctant brother and uncle to sing the perfect 3-part harmony that is Zombie's sole weakness. The contrast of the tween girl pop hit and a bunch of exploding zombie skulls is just pure bliss. Number 7, Not What He Seems. Is this the part where one of us faints? As Mabel's closing question suggests, Not What He Seems sends Gravity Falls' longest running mystery into overdrive, revealing both who wrote the journals and what Stan's doomsday device is for. Before the episode's big finale though, it's a heartfelt family trustfall wrapped in a prison break adventure sprinkled with pop culture allusions, and series and jokes. Among the highlights are a terrific dunk on Ashton Kutcher and Punked and Zeus's laugh line. It's the final countdown just like they always sung about. But first among equals is Mabel securing her and Dipper's release from government custody after Stan is arrested, by writing several times as overrated in the dirt on a Hummer's window, so enraging a beefy trucker, and several times fan, that he drives him off the road. Number 6, A Tale of Two Stans. By the end of this series' second season, the truly best episode really starts to pile up. Some are better than A Tale of Two Stans, but few are more wrenching. Just the pathos of the episode, seeing the long line of bad choices and worse luck that Stan and Ford both make from high school on, that pushes them further and further apart from one another, and deeper into the most self-defeatingly toxic parts of himself. It's just absolutely gutting. That Stan was revealing the secrets of his past and the depth of Ford's paranormal experimentation to the twins while under investigation from the government agency that has been trying to trap Stan in the act of dimensional tampering the whole season gives the Pine brothers' harrowing history both a chance to breathe and some much needed moments of comic relief. But that relief isn't a cure. The brothers do not come out on the other end forgiving each other. Number 5, Society of the Blind Eye. In this season 2 episode, wanting to retrace the author of Journal 3, Dipper and Mabel, along with Wendy and Zeus, track down Old Man McGucket to investigate. However, their search takes a drastic turn when Lazy Susan is kidnapped after a gnome sighting by a group of people in red cloaks. It sets in motion one of the series' most secretly ambitious episodes, first morphing into a study of Old Man McGucket, and then to an unsettling lesson about the uses of memory. The B-plot in which Mabel frets over her failed summer romances. I just don't get it, Wendy. I hug a lot, I can burp the alphabet, I have scratch and sniff clothing, why does everybody leave me? As it turns out, the Society of the Blind Eye has been erasing the townspeople memories of supernatural occurrences, using a machine that McGucket, once a scientist, developed and used on himself. Watching the man's mind and life come undone as his reel of memories unpools on screen is one of the more unsettling sequences in the show, though it speaks to the importance of even our worst memories in creating our sense of self. Now that I've seen what happened, he assures Mabel, I can begin to put myself together again. A stark portrayal of Cult Society of the Blind Eye is a leap forward in the series' main arc of Grunkle Stan's hidden plot. Number 4, Headhunters. The reopening of Gravity Falls Wax Museum, followed by the execution of Mabel's glittering sculpture of Stan tees up the raft, of humorous pulp culture references that landed Headhunters on this list. The central mystery is pretty low stakes compared to later installments, but the episode sees Gravity Falls begin to stretch its comic legs. There's a brilliant sight laugh involving Dipper and Mabel's crayon and glitter fake IDs, for which they pose as Sir Dipping Sauce and Lady Mabelton, to get into a dive bar. Not to mention when entering the museum, Stan finds the blinds left open, and whacks Abraham Lincoln in a puddle on the floor. Wax John Wilkes Booth, he says. I'm looking in your direction. Number 3, Into the Bunker. This is the second episode in season 2 and it was excellent. There are 2 scenes with a shapeshifter that really caught my eye as a really creepy moment. This first one was when he revealed himself shaped as a person. At first we think it might be the author of the book, but it is later revealed to be a phony. He turns his head around, the body screams, runs up the wall, and is so disturbing. The second one was after the shapeshifter had been thrown into the freezer machine. As it slowly starts freezing him, he threatens Dipper. He tells him once he meets the author and learns who it is, it'll be too much for him. One thing that really sells this is the performance. The voice actor of this role is Mark Hillman, and he was once the voice of the Joker in the Batman animated series. And when Zeus said good luck sleeping tonight, that really sets it in for you as a watcher, hinting that you probably will have issues sleeping after watching that episode. Number 2, Weirdmageddon Escape from Reality. Weirdmageddon was a great 3-parter, and I definitely liked the first and the third the most, but in the second I appreciated how we got to see Dipper and Mabel's friendship come back together. But in between is when Dipper realizes how evil Mabelland really is. When Dipper believes he's having a moment with Wendy, he realizes it's a trick that Mabelland is playing on him. And once he stated out loud that she isn't the real Wendy, it then becomes a bunch of bugs, taking a very creepy and weird turn. As well as the entire atmosphere going dark, Dipper looks at the tree behind him and it gets so creepy and disturbing, and then everyone's saying, we are watching you, we are watching you. Not all the imagery from Weirdmageddon episodes are already creepy enough with the atmosphere alone. Part 1 and Part 3 are gruesome as well, with the dreary backgrounds and the really creepy characters, which are Bill's friends. But in that episode, that scene stands out the most as very dark and disturbing when tapping into Bill's true power, and what he wants to do to reshape the world as his playpen, as twisted and sick as he wants it to be. Now coming in at number 1, Summerween. Of course, because Gravity Falls has a spooky vibe, so they have to have a Halloween episode, leading to an awesome story about Dipper, Mabel, and their friends trying to collect enough candy. The story focuses mainly on Dipper building an ark, but we also see Mabel's insecurities about growing up and understanding between them as the episode progresses. The scariest moment of the entire episode is when the Summerween trickster is on screen. He may not have powers, but his physicality makes him resemble a creature from Spirited Away named No Face. He is obsessed with getting the children to get him candy, and if they don't, he will eat them like no one ate him, which is weird, but despite this odd motivation, though his backstory does come up very frightening into how he was designed and everything.
Starting our list right at number 10, we have It's All in Peter's Head. For more than 2 decades, the characters of Seth MacFarlane's Family Guy has put themselves through increasingly absurd situations. Whether it's epic chicken fights or the Peter Copter, the Griffins have gone through situations that would be completely absurd in real life. However, in the world of the show, they can get away with just everything and be fine in just the next episode. So why is that? A Reddit fan theory suggests the reason why they do this is because the world of Family Guy takes place inside of Peter Griffin's head. Let's begin with his kids. We all know the unattractive daughter Meg. Well, it's said that she's actually a beautiful and popular teenager with a slight drinking problem. Meanwhile, Chris is actually a mentally challenged brother. Well, in the show, it kind of depicts that already. Theory says that one day she got too drunk and decided to pick up Chris, but ended up in a fatal car accident killing them both. This would explain why Peter dislikes Meg so much, especially because her issues caused the death of her brother. His wife Lois was broken down from the death of the children and decided to take her own life while having Stewie in the womb. Yes, this theory is really dark, so I'm sorry kids. With the loss of the entire family, Peter loses his mind and creates this whole fantasy world inside of his own head. As for Stewie, well, Peter never got to meet Stewie, which is why he's portrayed as a smart and cunning baby, because this is a reflection of how Peter expected his son to be. Coming at number 9, we have an allusion to the Twin Towers. First of all, rest in peace to all of those affected. But did you know that Family Guy creator Seth MacFarlane was due to catch a flight that was destined to hit the Twin Towers? And his reason being was that he was hungover and overslept. Because I didn't know this, and I swear a lot of celebrities claim they just missed this tragedy. But this one is a little bit deeper than that. It was such an important event that fans thought it was the direct inspiration for the film's plot of Stewie having a near-death experience. Do you remember the scene where Stewie would get crushed by a falling lifeguard seat? Well, the scene is peppered with snippets of dialogue that may or may not reference the falling towers. Such as Stewie saying, quote, "Well then, it seems like there's only one thing to do. I must ensure that I never got in a close call with that lifeguard tower in the first place. And he also was saying, quote, yes, I did it. I stopped the tower from falling. This line struck out to me a lot because the falling tower was mentioned throughout the entirety of the film. Stewie's main goal was to go back in time to stop this tragedy. This moment could be attributed to the way Seth feels about missing the flight that was due to crash into the Twin Towers. That mixed feeling of guilt and relief is one of those feelings that are very hard to deal with, which could have inspired this traumatic episode in the first place. At our number 8 spot, we have the CIA's responsible for all humanoid animals. Do you remember that large chicken that would almost come out of nowhere and just start a full-on MMA fight with Peter? Well, his name is Ernie the Giant Chicken. Damn, I remember those fights, and I swear they would last just the whole show and be super chaotic and whatever. Well, a theory proposed by Reddit user Dial Taylor states that the CIA and the Family Guy and even the American Dad series has the ability to put human brains into any other animal or human. Klaus from the sister show American Dad and Brian Griffin from Family Guy are both great examples of this because they are both intelligent humanoids that could potentially pose problems for the CIA, such as Klaus potentially beating the USA in the Olympics for skiing and Brian being a hardcore liberal. Humanoids appear all over the universe. It could very well be a brain swapping program used to control the population. We know how sketchy the government is, and even more so in these TV shows. At our number 7 spot, we have the multiverse. Just came back from a Marvel movie, and it seems like I can't escape the multiverse theory, even in my own favorite show. Family Guy is just one of those shows where anything can happen at any time. This theory suggests that when the show first got cancelled in 2002, only 3 years after its debut, the old universe was completely destroyed, which is why the show is much more different after its re-release. This means that everyone in the show before are gone, and the characters we see now are the people in a new universe. At our number 6 spot, we have Stewie manipulates time on a deeper level. We see Stewie zapping in and out of different time periods using his time machine. Casual thing for a baby, I might say. But have you noticed that Stewie always stays around the same age? It doesn't seem like he gets any bigger, nor does he look any different throughout the whole 20 years of the show. The other family members seem to age, but very, very slowly. For example, Meg started at 16 and now she's around 18. Lois turns 43 in that episode where she had a midlife crisis, and Brian started the series as 7 and just celebrated his 10th birthday this season. So back to Stewie. He makes himself young to avoid the responsibilities of being old. Do you remember that episode when Stewie went into the future only to see a depressing, sad version of himself? That's the type of reality Stewie wants to avoid. On another note, he could be doing it for Brian as well. Seeing Brian die for the first time traumatized him, and he openly admits that it's his best friend. So he could very well be doing it to prolong his time with Brian. Right in the hump of our list, we have Brian is the real writer of the show. In season 12, episode 9, named Peter Problems, we hear Brian saying, quote, I have a job, I'm a writer, I'm working right now. See this? All of this? This is the raw material of a picture of life that I'm going to paint with words. This got fans thinking if Brian could be the writer of the show. We know that Seth MacFarlane writes the show in real life, and he uses his own voice to play Brian Griffin. He doesn't change it or anything. This could explain why Brian is often seen as the voice of reason, or is the one to dispute arguments and feuds between different characters. Most of the exclusive and deeper meaning Family Guy episodes are the ones with Stewie and Brian. And since Brian experienced these firsthand, it makes sense that these episodes are in more detail than any other. Number 4, we have Peter saved Lois's life. Reddit user Lemonade proposed a theory that Peter saved Lois from a life of depression and potentially worse. It's mentioned many times in the past that Lois was a drug addict in her days as a young adult. She has also shown bad tendencies such as being a kleptomaniac who is unable to resist the urge to steal. On top of that, her father is rich, but always seemed to be a little bit busy and would often neglect the young Lois. Being from a rich family meant that it was unlikely she faced the consequences for her actions. So picture this, a young rowdy girl with no discipline and an addiction to drugs. It almost seems like a recipe for disaster, all until Peter came along. Peter was mentally challenged at the time, so this gave a misdirected Lois an opportunity to take care of someone, which also slowed down her life in a good way. All the way at our number 3 spot, we have Family Guy's All a Cover Up. Originally, everyone's lives in the show were amazing. Cleveland still had a wife, Joe had his son and a loving marriage where his wife didn't cheat on him. Quagmire did the single life and his family probably wasn't tragic at this point. Peter was dumb but still managed to care for his family. Well, except for Meg. However, as the show progressed, everyone's lives took a turn for the worse. Peter and Lois will get into more frequent arguments, which led the two to be separated multiple times. Meanwhile, Cleveland lost his wife and his show, so when he came back, he gained a wife that still loves someone else. Quagmire started to hate on Brian aggressively, and he would often confess his love for his best friend's wife, Lois. Bonnie and Joe had a baby, but right after they would begin to hate one another. Even Brian died for a bit. At our number 2 spot, we have Joe Can Actually Walk. Joe is just known on the show as a character glued permanently to his wheelchair due to an accident in the past. Joe is often seen to act over the top emotionally, but is also used to insert awkward yet still funny humor, often regarding his disability. However, many fans believe that all of it is just a cover-up and he is actually able to walk. In many different episodes, Joe explains the origins of his disability, but each story is different from one another. In one backstory, Joe mentions that he got disabled due to fighting with the Grinch on a rooftop. In another backstory, he says that criminal Bobby Briggs is the one who shot him in the legs. Every story is different, and it just seems that he can't even get his story straight, which could potentially mean he's lying. Taking our number 1 spot, we have Stewie, Meg, and Chris are not Peter's kids. A fan theory suggests that Stewie, Meg, and Chris could not be Peter's children at all. Well, first of all, do we really think any one of them looks like Peter or Lois? In season 15, episode 20 named A House Full of Peters, it shows Peter donating his sperm to a sperm bank. The kids that shared the same sperm all pretty much look the same as Peter. So how could Stewie, Meg, and Chris not look like Peter at all? The theory states that back in the day, Lois had many affairs, and we could see that that isn't impossible, especially with her fishy past of adult filming and substance abuse. At a number 10 spot, we have Poof's real dad. In the show, we are introduced to Cosmo and Wanda's kid, Poof. But is it really theirs? As we see from other related fairies, they typically share characteristics to those they are related to. For example, Wanda and Blonda share similar pink eyes, while Cosmo and his mom share similar shades of green. Except when we look at Poof, there is no resemblance to either Cosmo or Wanda. Instead, Poof shares similar characteristics to another fairy we know, Juandissimo. So for those who don't know, fairies are able to have babies by using magic. Yet not any other way, you freaks. So when they tried to make a baby, they noticed that Cosmo was infertile, and instead the magic used Juandissimo's genetics to create Poof. Number 9, Trixie has her own fairy. So that Trixie is hiding a big secret in the show the whole time, and that is that she has her own fairy godparent. If you ever decide to pay attention to each person's eyes in the show, it will begin to tell you a lot about it. For example, if we look at Timmy's eyes, we will begin to notice he has blue eyes and no pupils. And this goes with his parents, Trixie, Mr. Crocker, and even Vicky. They all have single color eyes with no pupils. Then turn to look at Cosmo and Wanda's eyes, and you begin to notice they have a distinct pupil. Then if we look at every other fairy introduced in the show, we will notice that every single one of them has pupils as well. Basically, this confirms that fairies have pupils. But then there's Trixie's best friend, Veronica. And when we look into her eyes, we will notice that she also has pupils. So basically, Veronica is Trixie's own fairy, but she chooses to disguise herself as a best friend, and it seems to work out. I mean, we all know that Timmy hides Cosmo and Wanda in various shapes and forms to fit in. So what makes you say that a best friend is not a good disguise? Number 8, all imagined by an abused boy. A very famous theory online is that the entire show is imagined inside of a little boy's head. Except in this case, the image is the product of a household of abuse and depression. This is a very sad turn from the show, but it's a dark theory regardless, so here you guys go. This theory proposes that fairies and magic are all made up inside of an abused kid's head. The kid has neglectful parents who couldn't care less about them. And the only adults that would be open-minded to this kid were the grandparents. However, they had passed away, causing the little boy to play pretend with his 2 fishies. This is because he finds comfort in imagining they're there to watch over him like his grandparents did. When the parents send in the babysitter, the kid is helpless against her and instead imagines doing magic. And this would make sense because in the show, magic was really never having lasting effects. Number 7, Trixie's parents are corrupt officials. Trixie Tang is back on this list, and for all the wrong reasons. Trixie is not only the most popular and possibly the most wealthiest girl in town, she is also a spoiled brat that likes to brag about her possessions or achievements any moment she gets. And as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So let's see what her parents are like in order to have a kid like this. Reddit user by the name of Cosmic Biohazard brought up the theory that her parents are former corrupt government officials, which explains her child's invasive behaviors. This user brings up the Chinese term Fior Dai, I am so sorry if I mispronounced that, which was used to describe the children of parents who became extremely wealthy during the country's economic boom in the 90s. Number 6, Timmy Turner had a twin. So many theorists believe that fairies didn't exist the entire show. And they wouldn't be so wrong to think that. Many characters, specifically the adults, have no awareness that fairies exist. As well, it would explain why after every episode, everything goes back to normal and nothing ever changes permanently. Sometimes. Now let's say that fairies don't exist. Then what can Cosmo and Wanda be morphing into that appears to be either green or pink? Now let's go back to one of the older episodes where we have Timmy and his family moving in, but in the back of their move-in truck, it's filled with pink items that are clearly labeled girl, and even Timmy's hat is appearing in it. So what explains all the green items that Cosmo transforms into? Well, the theory tells us that Timmy's parents were initially expecting a single daughter, but instead they got twins, a boy and a girl. As they were growing up, something tragic happened along the way, causing the girl to pass away. Shocked by the events, Timmy grew up feeling as if he was missing another half, which would explain why he sees his made-up fairies to be in the colors of green and pink, in order for him to cope with his grief process. Number 5, how magic works. So the multiverse is apparently everywhere, and I even found a theory of that in the Fairly OddParents. A now deleted Reddit user brought up the theory about the true capabilities of a fairy's powers. Not only can they grant wishes for their godchildren, but this user said that they have the ability to travel into infinite amount of universes in order to grant these wishes. I mean, we can't lie. Some of these wishes are completely absurd and are highly controversial, whether or not we wonder how it would affect the show as a whole. But they end up never doing that. As I mentioned in another point, at the very end of every episode, everything comes back to normal. Well, most of the time. But having the ability to grant wishes in different universes explains why other kids' wishes have no effect on Timmy, but only other versions of him. This would also explain why everyone in the show seems to be oblivious to the things happening around them, let alone the fairies. Number 4, Cosmo and Wanda are antidepressants. Yes, these magical fairies are theorized to be a metaphor for antidepressants. Antidepressants in a show? What? Yes, Cosmo and Wanda are apparently metaphors for Zoloft and Prozac. And for those who don't know, these are 2 very potent prescription medications that are used to treat depression, anxiety, and other related issues. And let's face it, Timmy doesn't have the best life by any means. And with all this being said, despite the fact that he is a kid, it wouldn't be far off to believe he relied on prescription drugs to help with his struggles, especially in the future. This would also explain why the fairy godparents were only around him when Timmy really needed them, like when he's sad or has an issue. Number 3, the Dinglebergs represents Timmy's dad's dream life. The competition between Mr. Turner and Dingleberg happens throughout the entire series, it seems. However, many of you don't know that they're actually friends in high school until a girl set the 2 friends apart. Eventually, Mr. Turner would just grow more and more jealous of Dingleberg, especially after he started to become more successful. As Mr. Turner continued his dead-end job sharpening pencils, he would always have this inner hatred towards Dingleberg. Reddit user by the name of Kick-Ass Setter believed that Dinglebergs are a play on the term dink, which means double income, no kids. Mr. Turner then compared his life with Dingleberg, especially when he has a kid like Timmy Turner. I'm not saying Mr. Turner hates Timmy, but he just resents the life of what could have been if he had no child like Dingleberg. Number 2, Timmy doesn't need fairies. According to Negroni, the show's main theme is, quote, you don't really grow up until you figure out how to properly deal with your problems. One thing that bothers me about TFO, and it probably bothers you too, is that Timmy Turner learns the same lesson every single week. This lesson is that you just can't wish your problems away. Every time you do, you end up creating more problems. And even in a world where you can get everything you want, there are still rules, terms, and conditions that will hold you back. Which brings me to the true purpose of Fairly OddParents. It's not simply to give us a show where we can laugh at the misfortunes of a 10-year-old boy who has the world at his fingertips. It's to show us that fairy godparents aren't really there to just give Timmy whatever he wants. Instead, the whole point of giving Timmy fairy godparents is to teach him that he doesn't need them. Number 1, fairies rule the entire world. A Reddit user by the name of Hey Luda You Like to Eat talked about a theory claiming that fairies rule the entire world in the show. They started off by mentioning the two reoccurring themes we see in the show, which are a child's imagination and neglectful parents. Timmy's parents aren't the only ones who are neglectful, however. When we begin to look at the entire town of Dimsdale, most of the parents are strictly there for comedic purposes, and they usually lack awareness and common sense. One Reddit user placed the blame on an object in the show called memory wipers. This was first introduced in the episode named The Secret Origin of Denzel Crocker. In the episode, Crocker was introduced to a child with fairies, and this is where his persona basically comes from. After seeing the fairies, he immediately gets his mind wiped by this device, and it just didn't stop there. The device was used more and more on him until it decided to transform his body, and this is where Mr. Crocker developed his infamous twitch and obsession with fairies. Back to fairies ruling the world, and now we know the capabilities of this device. This Reddit user continued by saying that fairies only help children and wipe the memories of adults because they're trying to strip the intellect away from the world.